Likee.
Hello. There you go. Enunciate louder. There you go. It's your boy Stanley. If you want to try to speak much louder, there's a grind going downstairs, and also in my upcoming board today, which I either posted already or it's about to be posted, a Boruto. Well, it's a general Boruto episode review. I was speaking this low, not low, or just this low. It's more so uh, from the way I was either holding my phone or some shit. But anyway, this isn't the video to negate over that, even though it's my video. So what the fuck? So this will be an supernatural power scaling review on the SPN show. So more or less, I'm not just gonna talk. I'm not necessarily gonna talk about the characters as I do on my Twitch stream, because my second Twitch stream is more or less going to go over all the characters, their powers, and and also the small little dots incurring to each and one of them. This one I'm gonna go into the lure behind all of their powers, well, and more so misconceptions that even I have, and also that I have high hopes that, or just I'm very aware that the rest of the ESPN fandom has. So let's get into it. The basic thing to start off with, well, for me, for my own channel, like, comment, subscribe. Also, go check out on my Discord on Reaper Kage. I debate at times. I debate a lot, but 90%, well, 99, well, 90% of the time, if not all the time, I just pretty much go on to chill, go on my Twitch stream. I'll go on there to talk, debate, and it's and of course, yeah, let's get into it. So in general, for when it comes to SPN Powerscaling, there are a couple of things that are lacking, and a couple of things that they do get right. A couple of things that are lacking is that SPN, as with most other very popular shows, aren't too consistent with their power scaling. Even though if you compare to other supernatural shows ranging from anime shows actually try to do their best, ranging from Fairy Tail, Bleach, Black Cobra. Even though I haven't seen Black Cobra, I mostly get the gist of what they're trying to say with the Devil Army, with Lucifero. But even though they more so bring it out of the way that Lucifero isn't the strongest devil, and which is a little weird. But then again, when they bring in the DC film and how they interpreted the supernatural world from the top to from the top to the base all the way down to in between, they more so pointing out and are more so consistent on why so and so is the strongest, why the presence is the strongest, why his sons from Major from Musa Morsa to Michael are the top two, and why every time they're depowered, it's a major buff. By the same time, well, as it's a major debuff, but every time certain moments call, or just not, because more so when it comes to DC Comics and the way they do it, they more so do it in a more concise way. For example, they go out of the way to say this air somehow affects nine point beings, or the journey itself can affect them. Because more so, the supernatural world is unpredictable. When it comes to the supernatural series, it's more or less predictable. The problem is, okay, so once I say predictable, if in a certain way, the problem is the supernatural world is unpredictable. But in the format that SPN put it, they put it in a way that was supposed to be good, ranging from season 1 to 4, when 17 mostly had to deal with. Game up. So I was just housekeeping more or less. So anyway, so in general, to pretty much clarify what I'm trying to say, one of the things SPN doesn't necessarily get right is more or less consisting of consistency, mainly for the sake of the story. Because just like I said, a couple minutes, 17 are hunters dealing with beings ranging down from werewolves, vampires, to the point that every time the vampire activates their abilities, and it's more or less that, depending on where you look at it from the show, the way 17 come out on top. Some underhanded ways I can accept, others it's just a flat out no. But then again, the many factors that do go into the wins. For example, a vampire could react to her speed. Physical react to her speed cannot be as fast as its time manipulation speed. But then again, you just bring in excuses because every time I try to look at Simondine's combat with most beings that are ridiculously strong over them, ranging from werewolf spirits. Yes, there are other things that like going into such as traps, all that good stuff. But the problem is, you don't really need to be overly powered to predict what a human will do, or to predict more or less a plan, or more or less to predict what these certain traps will do. Crowley more or less didn't have to use that much demon perception. All what he did was that he noticed the carpet was loose, and then he noticed the fact that there was a demon casting spell right under it. And no, he just looked to his left, and then it was over. So Crowley could have killed the boys there. So and once again, this is a very powerful demon in terms of power, but not compared to, let's say, Asmodeus, or compared to this, or compare Jesse, or compared to even Eve the Mother Months. Even though her scaling is, I haven't really put her in the veil of her scale, but I would scale more say above the Prince of Hell. Even though scaling the Prince of Hell is a little bit lenient, mainly for the fact that it's due to their power of them being shown, because more so Azazel more or less flat out show off his power and still loses to a point blank.
Leave Benny alone!
And I don't. The reason why I'm not fully on board is because yes, plot armor. Chuck put literal plot armor around them, but it more. Okay, fine. When you have an omnipotent putting literal plot armor, when it comes to season 15, I am still upset because I've seen others more so made videos on this, but especially one which is more so an essay of Simondine's free will. What I like to cover around this and briefly before I'm going to the Powerscaling in general, Simondine more or less shouldn't have let that discussion. Chuck is now the embodiment of light and dark. He shouldn't be, since he sees the present, past, and future, and since omniscient, which the writers went out of their way for Chuck to flex that fact, and also, I guess, and also went out of his way to pretty much absorb his sister's power. Because I was on board with the thinking that Amar the Darkness was much stronger than Chuck, because even while she was injured, she was able to overpower him. The one thing we forgot, the thing we forgot in the end briefly, was that they're both omnipotent beings, and their grace more so isn't really a pullback because they're omnipotent characters compared to a non-omnipotent character, running from Lucifer, Jack, or Michael. Every time they're along with, it's more of a big deal in comparison, but they're still overpoweredly powerful. I mean, Jack, despite absorbing his soul, was able to rip out Earth to Michael. But the problem with that is that it was a soul. Even though you can be like, well, there was no proof that it was a soul filled with Archangel grace or his own grace, since he's that powerful. Even though this is before he got snapped out, and then he had to eat angel hearts in order for Jack to even be considered powerful enough to even later on hold the ribs of Adam for him to become a bomb. So then there's that. But in general, a lot of things were forgotten, especially with Chuck being omnipotent, which also means he would have very well known inside the brain of Simondine that they were scheming this. And since Michael is also not omnipotent, even though you could also argue that Michael wasn't fully perceptive enough because he was more so very focused, and you know that Simondine wouldn't lie to more suspect anything. But that's just a whole thing in terms of power that the SPN series not just allows the writer of the SPN series in the SPN series, Chuck got it, to be able to put plot armor, but there's also literal plot armor around what the writers put on Simondine, which more or less puts this whole video of Powerscaling out the video. But fuck it, I'm gonna do do it, and y'all gotta listen. And the other thing I forgot to mention is that SPN also forgot to put out any book. I mean, sure they had a separate series along with the anime, which more so fleshed out some of their adventures and who they go up against. But then again, more or less 90% of the time it's part of armor. 10% I would argue is more or less scope depending on who they're fighting. Because when it comes to these ankle traps, I can pretty confident say that Castiel, who made one on himself, more or less was beating the shit out of 17, and then somehow they able to kill a servant of Michael named Zechariah. Which, if you've seen the anime for the anime manga for How to Control an Angel, one of the uh, one of the main overpowered protagonists is a servant of Michael, and he's wicked powerful to the point that the humans have to run. And yes, he was stabbed by a demon who had a special blade that he cannot pull out. But this is because 90% of our demons, based on going out from what DC said, because there are a wide number of demons. Some came from heaven, which were fallen angels turned to demons by Lucifer. A wide majority also came from the pure darkest parts of creation. So in general, the ones who came down from heaven had the extensive knowledge on the angels, ranging from the archangel blade all the way to archangel spells, and even to spread up archangel. That's why they were able to counter Lucifer's power. But in general, more or less, they could more so not necessarily counter it, but hold it back. Because every time Lucifer would just get mad or just want to, he'll just snap his way out of it. Because he's an overpowered 9-point archangel. Now you would once again ask, how can you say that Lucifer, Michael, and Jack, or even Lucifer himself, is a human being? Just because DC's Lucifer Morningstar is stated to be not important and not omniscient, that they fleshed out a Lucifer Morningstar doesn't necessarily mean the SPN Lucifer is the same or has the same stats, even because when I look at the fight between Lucifer and Michael and their scaling between each other in the SPN series, one thing I also note is more or less that there's could be a higher chance of Lucifer's Michael in his reality to be an equal, while in Earth 2, that Michael more or less killed Lucifer off screen. His Lucifer was able to go through Lucifer in a fist fight, and then since Lucifer was depowered, was able to still go through him. Not until Lucifer got an amp from his son, which really shouldn't happen, even though there isn't no fully confirmed statement of Jack being able to negate an archangel blade, but raising on himself, and then an angel did it to him. We're like, okay, he's resistant to it. But then when Lucifer did it, it was like, come on, guys, you literally forgot that rule. Even though Lucifer was at a spot that he could died straight up. So still, there could be other ways in terms of writing and where they want a story to be and how they want it to be that can also benefit the power scaling and point the characters in certain spots. But then again, that story would have to go a very darker route than it really planned, because there are many things around it. For example, SPN does get certain power scaling aspects right, as long as the story isn't in the right direction, until it goes haywire and the writers forget certain power scaling aspects that govern the story or are in the story to govern the power scaling. We all know it goes haywire because we've seen it go plenty of times. Now, let me track back around just so I won't be saying numbers and shiz or shit. So in general, somebody more or less had to have amps, or if not, they need to have outside help other than having spells and traps to help them out. Because in comparison, John Constantine had the help of demon blood. Sounds familiar. Now, more or less, 17 did not want to have these certain helps from demons because more or less they'll begin to become more violent than they already are, which they already do for the sake of keeping others safe, but then they won't do it because it's horrifying to them. Do you see the whole controversial aspect of 17 ever getting help? But the only time they were, well, Dean straight up was like, okay, Michael, you can have me. Boom, was able to defeat Lucifer. Even more or less, if we're talking base to base without Lucifer having any help, it would have been a one-sided battle for Michael, the SPN version. Because in the DC version, they're more so stated out to be equals to the point that Lucifer tanks Michael's exploding grace that was able to manifest the entire DC multiverse compared to the SPN version in which, yeah. So because if we're trying to state that Lucifer's Michael in an SPN in his own reality is an equal, I would go off of how Lucifer was able to look at Michael when they first came across after a while, and Lucifer was more so looking at him as if not only he had the power to take him, but the confidence. So you can also say that even though his power is more not on Michael's level, but he was still confident enough to take him on, was more or less of how either Gabriel could look at Raphael or the Leviathan could look at Death and look, I can still take you on, even though I'm vastly weak. Because it's more so how God Castiel with the Leviathan, with the help of Leviathans and souls, more so look at Death, even though Death could have ripped God Castiel to pieces. And no, this is the SPN Death. So I'm gonna go just a bit in more, which I think y'all enjoying it, because I am. Like, comment, and subscribe. So, to subtly state this, I've said in multiple of my videos that Death is relative to Lucifer, but so many other statements such as him being as old as the creator, but so far he hasn't demonstrated the power. But then when his power gets passed down to his reapers, his third one gets ripped apart by Lucifer. So you can more or less say that you, like, instead of saying, "Oh no," you gotta look at it from this perspective in terms of the power of being potentially omnipotent and potentially on the level or past the level of the creator, because it's definitely not his. Because more or less in the DC verse, the Sandman series Death blatantly says that she's omnipotent without saying she's omnipotent, but practically says she's everywhere while talking to you. So that's practically Death and SPN of the Endless practically blatantly says of her being omnipotent. So there's no doubt of her being an omnipotent being on the level of the presence. But as for the SPN one, there's a lot of statements that is weird. He was held down by a spell made by Lucifer, but he's said to be as old as the present. If he's as old as the present, he should be able to take on both Amar and Chuck. The problem he was confident that he can reap God, just not confident enough that he was able to take on his sister, the darkness. Understandably, but you could also argue that Amara is just that much powerful, because Amara kind of her raw power was enough to hold down his own power, but then they're equals, they balance out each other. So you could then argue that Amara herself, she literally said that she is all that there is, that she started to crush out Chuck's essence. But as for when Chuck had to break out, Amara once again had her. Amara once again had Chuck, excuse me. And the only way Chuck could ever get out was by manipulating her, absorbing her power, and then boom, Chuck was a morph between the light and dark and was his own omnipotent being on his own. The main problem with that is three things. One, Death already so so far was confident was you. I mean, you can start to see that he's scaled towards Chuck, but not scales towards Amara, because Amara could slightly be more powerful than no is slightly more powerful than her brother, because by raw power alone, Amar was able to hold him off, which we kind of saw, and we're like, oh, they're equals. Shouldn't they be able to? Shouldn't Chuck be able to break out of his sister's grip? So more or less, you can say Death scales towards Chuck, and that he's very, very much so stronger than Chuck, but just not much stronger than the darkness. But you can say he was not confident to go up against the darkness, and that's Death saying that, even though a lot of things that going from. But I'm gonna say blatantly, Amar is more or less Chuck's equal, but has a bit more power than him. But then that just wouldn't make him his equal. That would just make him his that would just make her his superior. But then again, that would just make him fuck the confusion here. But I and as her death, more or less, since since his power got passed down to Reapers, you can then put him on Chuck's level. But so far, if you've seen my Twitch view, for the sake of what happened to his power and the way it passes down from Reaper to Reaper to Reaper, you can just say his power is flat out on level of the Archangels and somehow gets stronger somehow by facing against an opponent being. But there's no way to excuse what happened. Not his death against Dean, like that did not happen. That did not happen. Thought that was funny. But anyway, another thing more or less to go over real briefly is more so the power of the Archangels and how they were able to be. Actually, I don't need to talk much about the power of the Archangels. If you want me to more or less to go over it, I more have an Archangels the Archangels review video, and I'm most likely will be doing it on Twitch because I have more time to go over more so because I have to go to work now. But this is just the baseline of SPN and SPN Powerscaling. It's been your boy Sam Leaper. Yeah.